All right, let's come out of that to take you live to KZN now. There's been rumors that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi is stepping down as the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu Nation. He's holding a press briefing to give clarity on that. Let's listen in.
The person to chair Ngonyama Trust Board after Jacob Mnisi declined the offer. Businessman Mnisi has blamed tribalism for his withdrawal as the nominee of the Ngonyama Trust Board chairperson post. This is the main center of all this that is happening. Mr. Jacob Mnisi, a businessman from Mpumalanga province. And what is circulated is premised, from what I can understand, on discussions between the king and I on Sunday, the 14th of May. And I must point out, ladies and gentlemen, that when His Majesty the King meets with his Prime Minister or writes to his Prime Minister, the content of discussions is not intended for public consumption, and it is by its very nature private and confidential. Yet, it has not stopped anyone, of course, from pretending to know what His Majesty and I discuss, or from publishing rumors claiming to be reports of our private discussions with the King. So, for the sake of setting the record straight on this rumor, I'm compelled, ladies and gentlemen, to divulge now what took place in my meeting with His Majesty on the 14th of May as it relates to the position of traditional Prime Minister. In that meeting on the 14th of May, I mentioned to His Majesty the King that I had received information that Mr. Jacob Mnisi, the businessman who was previously tipped to become the chairperson of the Ngonyama Trust Board, had suggested to the King that he should appoint His Royal Highness Prince Vanana of the Gwamenya Royal House as his traditional Prime Minister. I said, ladies and gentlemen, in the presence of His Royal Highness Prince Vanana himself, His Majesty's legal advisor was present as well as other people, including some members of the royal family at this meeting, and two former members of the Ngonyama Trust Board who are lawyers themselves, and also in the presence of a businessman by the name of Muzi Ntombela. When I mentioned this thing at this meeting, there was no reaction to what I said by His Majesty. He neither confirmed it nor denied the information. It was Prince Vanana himself who just sighed and said, "Oh," that was all. So I felt important to raise this matter with the King, specifically because it involves the man who was said to become the chairperson of the Ngonyama Trust Board, who had been appointed by the King himself. And you recall that in February, Mr. Mnisi issued the statement I've just mentioned, saying that he had declined his nomination to the position of chairing the Ngonyama Trust Board when the King offered the position to him, citing tribalism and the fact that he would not be able to do business with the trust if he were is chairperson. That would be a conflict of interest, he said in the article. He claimed that the Zulu Kingdom is poor because effectively the board lacks business skills, opting insisted for a Zulu chairperson, he said. One can understand why there are concerns over the role that Mr. Jacob Mnisi is playing on all the matters of the Zulu nation, all of them. But let me speak to the matter of the position of the traditional prime minister. There is nothing new, ladies and gentlemen, in all these attempts to drive a wedge between the king and his prime minister. I've seen these attempts many times over almost 70 years in the service of the kingdom and the king. Greed for power or money has always been at the center of it, as is the case just now. I've endured unjust attacks and hateful experiences for the greater part of my life because of this position. I hold the king's prime minister, and I've tolerated it because I'm committed to serving and protecting my king and my Zulu nation. There is no personal benefit for holding this position. There is no salary attached to it, and there never has been. Not a single cent comes my way for being a prime minister. In fact, I'm not afforded even an office staff or any resources with which to perform responsibilities as traditional prime minister of the Zulu Monarch and the Zulu Nation. I'm obliged to fund this myself from my own pocket. This has always been the case. It is why I rely on the voluntary services of individuals in my own office and in my party, whom I trust to assist with administration and media liaison. That's why it's the case. Some people in the media have tried to query this. I've never clung to this position. Listen, I've never clung to this position. In fact, years ago, in the presence of the royal family, I suggested to His Majesty, King Zwelitinga Peguzulu, that he should release me from it. Because I was not appointed by him, I was appointed by his father, King Cyprian Peguzulu Nyangayizizwe Solomon. King Zwelithini, however, never withdrew me as traditional prime minister to the Zulu nation, to the Zulu monarch rather, and nation, and never appointed anyone else in the position, and I served him in the nation until he passed away. I served him that for almost 50 years. I served King Zwelithini. I've accepted my responsibility, onerous as it has been, as I've said, because I know, ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully. Princess Makoko, Constance Bilile, Ngangezinye kaDinizulu, my mother, had her own boyfriend. But her father, her brother, King Solomon kaDinizulu, was very angered when one of the princesses was actually seduced by someone they regarded as a commoner. And he wanted to marry this half-sister of his to my father. So the royal family influenced Princess Magongo Belala, this other half-sister, not to accept. So King Solomon kaDinizulu then instructed her own full sister, my mother, to marry my father, who was the King Solomon prime minister. Inkosi uMathole. And he was sort of trying to reward my father because my father, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, had helped the king to resolve a very complicated matter between his principal induna, Mankulumana Kamasomapunga Ndwandwe, and Prince Mnyaiza, the son of the half-brother to King Gejwayo, which led the king then, King Solomon, to offer the hand of his only full sister. Prince Mnyaiza, incidentally, is the grandfather of Prince Banana. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I thank God for that. In a sense, I'm haunted by that history and that arrangement and that instruction by my uncle King Solomon to my mother to abandon her own boyfriend to marry my father. It is the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why I've tolerated all the tribulations, the kingdom in this position. I must also point out that the position of traditional prime minister to the Zulu Monarch and Nation is not recognized in our constitution because the ruling party, the African National Congress, did not want it there. The whole issue of the recognition of the Zulu monarchy was a difficult one during constitutional negotiations. It's a pity that all of you are young. None of you are young. You know about these negotiations for a new South Africa, a democratic South Africa. The whole issue of the recognition of the Zulu monarchy was a difficult one during constitutional negotiations, for I was the only one in the negotiations who was advocating for the recognition of our king and of our kingdom, and the only one who was actually fighting for Amakosi, the traditional leaders. And that is why even now, Amakosi have no role at all in hello, 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 hello.
Hello, Your Excellency.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can continue. But please turn the video towards the left. Prince Zuzi.
But
a little bit. There we go. Thank you. Thank you.
I can't hear.
Continue.
What is
you can continue. You can continue.
Okay. Let me continue. It is only because of my insistence. Everyone knows that, the older people know that the king himself is recognized in the constitution. On the 19th of April, 1994, I insisted that Mr. de Klerk, the president, must actually make sure that the position, the recognition of the Zulu monarchy is enshrined in the constitution. He was very reluctant. President F.W. de Klerk, actually, I forced him to reconvene parliament for one day just to include the recognition of the Zulu monarchy in the constitution at my insistence. I was told that everything relating to the position of the king would be dealt with in the constitution for KwaZulu-Natal when it was drafted later. When we tabled that draft in the legislature, that constitution, it was accepted by all parties, including the ANC. That constitution, indeed, it covered everything relating to the position of the king and the role of the traditional prime minister. However, at the 11th hour, when the Constitutional Court was set to certify the Constitution of KwaZulu-Natal, His Excellency, he was then just a member of the legislature, Mr. Jacob Zuma, who was the chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, he went behind our backs and prevented the Constitutional Court from certifying the Constitution. That had all that. Thus, the ANC stopped any recognition of this position in law. There had also been an agreement during negotiations that there would be international mediation to resolve rather the issue of the recognition of our king and the autonomy of our kingdom, limited autonomy. I think just like as we can see in Uganda, where you have got the recognition of the Buganda monarchy and the Toro monarchy. The then president of the country, Mr. F.W. de Klerk, Mr. Nelson Mandela, our former president, he was not president then, and I agreed at this private meeting, at this Kukuza summit in the bush on the international mediation. However, international mediation was then torpedoed by the two spokesmen of the ANC. One of them is His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, who was the spokesman of the ANC, and the other was the spokesman of the National Party, Mr. Rolf Meyer, because prior to that, the National Party and the ANC went into a boss parade. They went in the bush where they said during negotiation, they agreed between themselves that any consensus between the ANC and the National Party would be sufficient consensus. And the spokesman for that was Mr. Ramaphosa and Mr. Meyer, that it should not be done because it would mean the rewriting of the Constitution. So they torpedoed that. So I decided that the IFE was not going to go into election. We all decided that. But on the 19th of April, 1994, only 8 days before the 1994 elections, Mr. Mandela, President de Klerk, and I signed a solemn agreement that the international mediation would resume as soon as elections were over. But that promise again was dishonored because we agreed on the 19th that the international mediation, Mr. Mandela agreed, Mr. de Klerk and I, that after the 27th, after the election, the international mediation would immediately. And this international mediation was very important, ladies and gentlemen. You know, among its members were people like Lord Carrington, who carried out all the negotiations of all the former colonies of Britain. And among it, one of the mediators was the former United States Secretary of State, Dr. Kissinger. So we agreed on that. But then after the election, I kept on asking Mr. de Klerk, when is this going to be done? And whenever I asked Mr. Deputy President de Klerk about it, he said whenever he raised it with Mr. Mandela, the president got very angry. He would get angry and he wouldn't actually want to engage on the subject, have it mentioned, you know. And so that agreement has not been honored to this day. It was dishonored. And at the same time, in the royal family itself, there emerged someone called Prince Sifiso Zulu, who was said to be a product of King Pande, a son of King Pande, who said that, you know, who also dismissed any idea of an international mediation and said the government would do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I felt it necessary for me to provide you with this background because most of you are young. You don't know it. so that the idea may be put to rest once and for all. For all that I'm clinging, any idea that I'm clinging to this position of traditional prime minister, as though I receive some personal benefit from holding it, when I don't get even a blue cent. There would be no humiliation for me to relinquish it now. Having served loyally for almost 70 years, I would have no regrets whatsoever. But the simple fact is that I have not asked His Majesty to release me from the position, because I told His Majesty from the very beginning that I would serve at his pleasure for as long as he required me and as long as I'm able, for the sake of the kingdom and for the sake of the Zulu nation. The king has not asked me to relinquish his position in spite of all these circumstances, and I'm still in the service of the king. So you can see how much damage these journalists who wrote all this, actually stirring, pandemonium in the Zulu nation by saying that I've released it, I've relinquished it. I realize that the current speculation, which is baseless as it is, has been bolstered by a publication of an article that purports to convey the contents of a private letter which was written to me by His Majesty the King on the 17th of May this year. I'm disgusted, ladies and gentlemen, by the action of the journalist on the question, because he has always dogged my steps. This journalist of the Daily News at one time, published in the Daily Sun that I shortly after my wife had died, that I was going to get married to the grandson of the founder of the African National Congress Youth League, the founder of he said, he speculated that, and he'll forgive me. And he crudely said that he wondered why I was going to do so, because I can no longer poke, P-O-K-E. Apologies. Now, this is the journalist now who wrote that tribe. And by doing so, he has compromised the court case of His Majesty the King by publishing confidential correspondence between the King and his Prime Minister relating to the case. The matter is sub judice and will be heard in the court in the next few days. I have no intention, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, of speaking about this case in the media, knowing that the matter is still in court. But I must point out that the contents of the King's letter to me were not quoted verbatim either. Certain words were changed and others were omitted, which materially affect the meaning of the letter. Moreover, despite claims by the journalist no mention is made in the letter of my ever having expressed a preference or having demanded that the king must appoint the Honorable Mr. Jerome Ngwenya, the former judge who was the chairman of the Ngonyama board. That remains the king's preference. I did that. I'm the author and the creator of Ngonyama Trust, of the Ngonyama land. I'm the author, and it is I who made the king the sole custodian. It was done by me. That should be remain always as the king's prerogative. Beyond that, advising the chairperson of the board should have legal expertise. As the former members have also advised, I have not told the king or tried to dictate to the king ever who he should appoint. I've never done so. These matters related to the Ngonyama transport will be fully aired in my meeting with the Makosi on Friday, the 26th of May in Mbangen. I shall therefore not discuss them any further here, but I'll reveal them to the AmaKhosi, who are stakeholders of Ingonyama land. For that reason, and because the mayors also work on the Ngonyama land, I've asked them to be present. Everyone will be accredited. I will not entertain any gate crashers, but the media have allowed. Regarding that meeting, however, I wish to provide you with an update. As you are aware, ladies and gentlemen, I extended an invitation to AmaKhosi of the Zulu Kingdom to attend that meeting on Friday, in which I, as the founder of the Ngonyama Trust and as the traditional prime minister to the Zulu Monarch and Nation, will brief AmaKhosi on recent developments regarding the Ngonyama Trust Board. Ladies and gentlemen, since the invitation was issued, there have been several misrepresentations of the meeting being an imbizo. That is not an imbizo. It's not an imbizo. I wish to make it clear that I have not called an imbizo of the Zulu nation, but only a meeting of AmaKhosi as the stakeholders of the Ngonyama Trust land, in their capacity only. They only. The meeting is thus not open to everyone, and the venue cannot accommodate everyone. It's only enough for AmaKhosi. I've, however, taken the decision to invite mayors of municipalities which administer governance within the trust land. And this is clearly important for them to have a clear understanding of the situation. To ensure that those attending are invited, I request that all AmaKhosi and all the mayors must register and be accredited in advance. They must receive accreditation. I won't allow any gate crashers. Very sensitive matters will be discussed, and the collective wisdom of AmaKhosi will be sought by myself. On that note, I would like to advise members of the media in advance that while you are welcome, because I know that the fourth estate in any democratic country is actually the future of any democratic country. So you are welcome to join us, in spite of the fact that this is a very sensitive discussion. Only during my briefing, I will allow you to be present, just with AmaKhosi to require. But afterwards, I please with you now, I announce that we in AmaKhosi will require privacy for our discussions on the matter I raise. I will ask you just to be patient and wait outside somewhere. And then we'll reopen the meeting again for the media when decisions are announced. Please, I'm pleading with this. I'm pleading to you, ladies and gentlemen, don't be annoyed with us. I've tried as a Democrat to comply with the fact that you as the fourth estate must be there. You must not be excluded in these things so that the nation must know what is going on. And you are welcome where I can. But where I say this is off record, I'll ask you not to when I make my briefing, where I've taken the risk to ask you to be present. Moreover, due to the sensitive nature of matters, I've said that upfront, there should be an upfront agreement with all the media present that whatever I state as a matter of record be strictly treated as such. That is actually accepted. In fact, while the public interest and the right to information are respected and upheld, it's necessary for the security of individuals to be protected as an overriding priority. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not bullying anybody, but I say we should have this agreement. I've never in my whole life, in fact, I've been awarded accolade like the newsmaker of the year, by South African journalists of South Africa. When I served this country, I've been accredited by the Pretoria, what do you call this? Because I've always, respected the fourth estate. The media are therefore also kindly requested to register, as I say, for accreditation in advance, so that the registration should be complete before 10 o'clock. Give an indication that you accept the conditions we have of necessity. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very, very much. Thanks very much for your time. And I noticed in the eNCA this morning that some people have stated that I've transgressed by holding this meeting, which is utter nonsense, because I have every right to call the meeting of Amakhosi. And I had the courtesy to write a letter in the king. I mentioned this to the king, in fact, verbal, and in writing I wrote him. And in fact, I was not asking for permission. I was just doing so. I'll tell you an example. That in 1994, because the king was angry because Umar Deba was not invited to the king's celebrations, boycotted he canceled the king's celebrations. And I called it, and the Zulus came in their thousands, And there have been many meetings before, during the almost 7 years, where I've called meeting of Amakhosi. Even as an elder of this nation, I have every right, even if I was not the king's prime minister, as an elder of the nation and as a colleague of Amakhosi, I have every right to call Amakhosi. So it's also poltergeist to say that, I should have got a permission. I didn't get the permission of the king. I want that matter clearly. Well, I thank you. That is what I wanted to say to you. And I thank you profusely, ladies and gentlemen, for having come. But if you have any question, then... Huh? Yes, there are questions. If you have any question, then I'll welcome them.
Thank you very much to the Traditional Prime Minister, to the Zulu Monarch and Nation, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, for that comprehensive briefing. Thank you very much. Can I then ask if there is anybody that would like to pose a question? If you want to pose a question, you can raise your hand.
I beg your pardon?
I'm asking if anybody wants to ask or pose a question, as you have proposed.
If you can tell me the media house and then ask.
Okay. It looks like, yes, no, it looks like we don't have any questions. So there's no questions. They've only asked for a copy of your statement, which I will circulate.
Yes, I've got the copy of my statement. I don't know how to send it to you.
I've got it. I've got it. I will circulate it, Your Excellency. I will circulate it, Your Excellency. Not a problem.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you
very much, colleagues in the media, for joining us this afternoon on such short notice. We will keep you abreast of the meeting on Friday. Thank you.
All right, that is the Prime Minister, the traditional Prime Minister of the AmaZulu Nation, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, just rubbishing claims that he has decided to vacate his position as the traditional Prime Minister of the AmaZulu Nation. This, of course, after media reports that he and King Msizulu Lithini had a fallout over who could be the chairperson of the eNCA Trust. Businessman Jacob Mnisi was approached earlier this year to become the chairperson of the trust, but this week sometime it was announced that eNCA Thanduyise Nzimela would be the one who takes over as chairperson. And then there were media reports that there was a fallout between the king and the prime minister over the chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust. But he's speaking about this being something that is untrue. He also says that he doesn't appreciate that. He says this position has actually stressed him out for a couple of years now. He says it's nothing new, that there are things that are said about him out there. He says he's only endured it because he wants to protect the king and also because of his love for the AmaZulu Nation. He's been serving as prime minister since 1954, starting with the former king, Zwelithini, Goodwill Zwelithini, that is. So he's still prime minister, and he says he'll invite us to one of the meetings that he'll have with the king quite soon as the media.